All right. Butterscotch shenanigans. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 91 of Coffee with Butterscotch, the game dev comedy podcast of Butterscotch Shenanigans. I'm Seth and I'm the games programmer.
I'm Adam and I do all kinds of weird stuff.
I'm Sam and I'm the shapeshifter.
And today is that was good.
Yeah, you gave that title to
buddy.
me yesterday.
Yeah, I know, that's why it's so good. Today is March 28th, 2017. Before we get started, we have a warning. Anything can happen on this show. There's going to be profanity, definitely. And then we're going to talk about stuff. And if you don't want to hear that, then go away. Mm-hmm. So a couple important points here, you guys.
What?
For starters, this is episode 91.
Yeah, you told us that already.
So episode 91 is an extra special episode.
Oh, yeah.
Is it Prime?
No, but it is 7 times 13, which is the luckiest number multiplied by the unluckiest number. So what's going to happen?
Oh, I don't know.
Does it cancel out? I mean, the unluckier number is bigger, though.
I think it's a whole lot of good and a whole lot of bad. It's one of those roller coaster days.
Yeah, okay.
It could be.
So it's one of those cases where the mean doesn't reflect reality.
Correct.
Unless luck works just like numbers, where, you know, if you multiply a positive luck by a negative luck, then the just result is negative, you know?
Whoa.
So,
But it is a bigger unluck.
It's a bigger unluck.
Well, it's also true that for humans, losses loom larger than gains, right?
Psychologically.
Yeah. So it's bigger and looms larger.
It's bigger and loomier.
So I think
this is the biggest, loomiest episode of the podcast probably ever.
What's the conversion of loom units? You know, when you're looking at luck versus unluck, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
six to 1.
6 to 1.
Yeah.
Depends on how well you can weave.
Yeah.
The strands
Yeah.
together.
Loom efficiency is key when it comes to your conversion rate. All right, so we got a couple news.
thread count.
We got a couple news updates this week. For starters, we're starting the hashtag Vig hype train.
Oh yeah.
What's that?
Wait,
about?
is it whole Vig hype train? Is
Just
it
Vig
one?
hype.
We're starting the train of hashtag.
We're starting
Vig
the
hype.
trend train.
Yeah. So those of you who listen to the podcast know that we've talked off and on about the project we're currently working on. We've referred to it various times in various places, probably all completely incorrect from what it actually is turning out to be. So I'd say currently, which is why I'm just not going to talk about it anymore. We came up with the concept of vague hype to just get you vaguely hyped about the next game we're working on without.
Although I do have a
tell you
question about this concept of vague hype that you concocted.
Does it work?
Did you Google it first?
No, I didn't.
Because it does already exist.
Does it?
I clicked on the hashtag when people started tweeting it at us.
But there's only like 5 people who've used it in like 2014.
I think it's for people.
I mean, it's not like an enormous.
well,
number.
we're gonna
Adam.
we're gonna subsume it. That's
yeah,
a word, right?
We're gonna become the vague hype.
Yeah, because what I saw is that it's people who basically say a thing but won't tell anybody about it, and then they want people to come in and be like, "What do you mean? What's happening?"
Yeah,
right. So that's basically what we're doing also.
Yeah.
But we're going to just, with sheer volume, try to just take it.
But what if it
Drown it
becomes
out.
kind of a Kleenex scenario where we use it so aggressively that everybody
Then it becomes generic.
and now we don't get to use it
I'd be
anymore.
happy with using. Oh, you mean we don't get to use it anymore?
Like, because then it would be just
Well, we'd
generic.
lose the trademark, which we did file for a trademark. So
So don't use it or we'll sue you into the ground.
yeah, totally. Also, we learned this week that once again, premium is dead.
Yep. This was announced again.
This keeps happening.
Like somewhere on games industry. I'm not even going to bother talking about the article. But just you guys in the premium super dead mobile space.
Yeah.
Still, again.
Yep.
So
Super dead.
Still it again. It's like it's a zombie, basically. It just keeps on being resurrected and then dying
Yeah.
again.
You know, we talk about this a lot in the podcast about, you know, you read your industry news to keep a pulse on stuff, but don't
I mean, read it, but
trust all of
don't
it.
read it.
Yeah. Don't necessarily believe it, I guess. So, again, context is king. And most people who proclaim these things do not give all the bits of context that would really point out why it is that they're proclaiming such a thing.
Yeah.
So we're just going to leave it at that and move on. But I want to talk about vague hype again, Seth. I wasn't done. So,
Oh, sorry.
we sent out a newsletter over the weekend. How many people to go out to?
It went out to 130,000.
103,000. Which is always a weird thing to just hit a button on Friday and then be like, we're going to be emailing 1 billion people this weekend.
Well, only 130,000.
Okay,
Sam.
whatever, you get my point. So we did that.
So
and we included some concept art for the next game that Tifa had whipped up. And the best part about it was the next day, or maybe it was just on Friday afternoon, after we had started sending it, Tifa looked over at my screen and she saw some of her concept art in there. She's like, when did you get that? And I was like, earlier when I told you I was going to take a picture of your stuff. She's like, I didn't know you were taking it for a newsletter. And I was like, yeah, this is going out to 150,000 people. And she's like, oh my God, no. She's like, you should have let me choose the right. And I was like, no, you got stuff to do. This is me marketing secretly.
Guerrilla marketing, I think is what they call it.
So the lesson there is, you never know when somebody's just going to walk past your desk, take a snapshot of something, and then email it to 150,000 people.
Welcome to Butterscotch.
Yeah. Do we want to talk about our magical subject line robot, or should we save that until we have more?
Well, let's talk about this problem.
Yeah.
So the problem generally in email marketing, which by the way is still the most effective means of marketing. So if you're a game dev,
there are many problems.
Yeah, well, there are many problems. But if you're a game dev and you're spending more time on Twitter than you are on your email marketing campaigns, then you're doing it very wrong. I'm just going to go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's also the case if you're spending any time on Twitter instead of developing.
As we've talked about, yes.
You're also doing it
Don't
wrong.
be on there. But generally, Twitter can't be trusted for marketing purposes very well. There are ways to use it, but we're not going to worry about those currently. We're just going to talk about how with email marketing, you can reach a big audience who tends to care, and people open stuff that's in their inbox. But the biggest problem that we have from an email marketing standpoint is just getting people to open the email, because we know we got cool pictures, we write funny words, we say good things,
we got nice colors.
Nice colors. We know that once someone gets in, that they're gonna be like, "Oh, this is nice.
Ooh.
This is pleasant." And our open rates reflect that.
I feel like my eyeballs are getting massaged by this email.
Something like that.
And the issue basically becomes how to craft a subject line that people actually open. And there's a lot of talks about A/B testing in email marketing, where basically you pick some subset of your user base, you pick 2 subject lines, and then you pit them against each other, send out 1,000 emails each, see which one gets better open rate, and then pick the better one. But we found that it seems basically random which subject line's good. We can't tell. We have no ability to tell. Actually,
our predictive power has been really bad so far.
So we're gonna make a thing that lets us get better at writing subject lines by not getting better at writing subject lines.
It's the spaghetti strategy. Just gonna throw some spaghetti at the wall.
No, this is our GDC talk strategy again.
Yeah.
So again, for those who haven't been around, we got 2 talks accepted to GDC this year. But the way we did it was, instead of just submitting one really good one like we have in years past, we submitted 11. So
ones, though.
They're all really good. But with this subject line thing, that's essentially what we're going to do. Where Adam's going to build a little easy machine learning algorithm that will feed it a bunch of subject lines that we make up, and then we'll just let them fight each other in sort of an evolutionary battle to the death.
Yeah. And then the robot just picks the best ones. What I like about this approach is we no longer have to craft the perfect subject line. We can craft, because we don't know.
Correct.
Right? We don't know what's a good
now
one,
the
really.
perfect subject line crafts us.
Exactly.
And
so we get to come up with like 5 different ones, and then we can also throw in a wild card.
Right.
Just what we always do. Yeah. We always do this on our like icon tests. And stuff.
So we can throw one in where we're just like, all right, I don't know if this is going to work, but we're going to really just go for broke on this one. Really push the envelope and just see what happens.
But I want to also back up and explain why this is such a huge problem. And because A/B testing is still the solution, right? We're just doing it in a very particular way. But the reason it's a problem, and such a hard problem, is because when you're doing this kind of stuff, when you're launching a game or sending out a newsletter or sending out a tweet or whatever, you don't actually get to do an experiment.
Right.
Because you get to do it once, right? And then by the time, if you're trying to do it in an experimental way, then if you're doing really good A/B testing where you're sending out to different people at the exact same time, completely randomly chosen and that kind of thing, then you really can actually kind of separate the world in some capacity if you do a really good job of choosing who's who, right? But the way that that's typically done is you then just have a static number. You just send it out, then wait for a while, get the results back, and then do a little statistics to try to figure out if one is better than the other, if you're lucky enough that you have enough statistical power to be able to even tell the difference, which actually most of the time you don't. Right. And then in all the other cases, you don't even get to do that at all if you don't have really good A/B setup, because if you do, one tweet today with one line and one tweet tomorrow with a different one, and then ask which one's better, you're already playing a losing game, because there are a million other reasons that those could have different results. So what we're trying to solve is basically that, where we can just say, we don't get to do the experiment. We just have to let the thing to adapt to whatever is happening, right? Because it could actually be the case that for some reason at 3 p.m., people would prefer a different subject line than they would at
3 p.m. on
noon,
Friday
right?
versus
On Friday,
3 p.m.
yeah.
on Monday.
And so even if you choose a really good subject line from some A/B testing and then send it to the rest of your 100,000 people, by the time they all get it, maybe that's actually not the right one for them.
You know what this
anymore,
reminds me of? Jeffrey Lynn from Riot Games gave a talk at GDC where he was talking about experiments that they ran. Because in League of Legends, they have millions of matches per day, right? So they have so much statistical data. And their big problem was, how do we reduce player toxicity? And so they started doing all these really weird experiments to try to gauge what would happen. And so they would just do these constant A/B tests where, for example, they would have a suite of 10 messages that would randomly be displayed to players on a loading screen.
Like a little tip or a little lore piece, right?
Yeah.
Like a sentence.
Yeah. And so sometimes they would have it say something like, did you know that, being positive towards your teammates increases your chance of winning by this percent, right? And then they would measure and see like how many people got reported for bad behavior in games that had that message versus games that had different messages. But then they found out some really interesting stuff, which is that posting the same message, but just changing the color of the message actually had a dramatic, statistically significant impact on how many people responded.
Yeah, so they used white, red, or blue text. Yeah, red is normally associated with in Western culture in particular with negativity and anger and stuff, and blue tends to be more on the chilled out side of things. And
but also red is the color of error messages and stuff, right? That we always use.
Right. And the idea is that it's a concept called priming, which is a really old psychological concept. It basically shows that my favorite study with priming has to do with you bring a bunch of college students into a room and you have them read a list of words. So some of them just read a random list of words. The other ones read what appears to be a random list of words, but that all have sort of associations with old age or being like slow. And then they're just asked to walk down the hall to turn in their sheet of paper.
And just time them.
And they time how long it takes them to walk. And people who essentially have been primed by these sort of old words, the brain has picked up on this idea that like, I need to be old right now. And so it slows down. So there's statistically significant slower pace of moving basically after reading these priming words. And you see this with selling people things. And also there's tons of uses for priming. And this idea of pairing a color with a particular phrase, is essentially a way of priming players before they go into a match to see if you can sway their behavior either way. Yep. It's not going to work for someone who's like literally having a terrible day. Like they're not going to read it and be like, oh yeah, I guess it'll be nice now. Like
it's not conscious.
It's an aggregate behavior in that like on average people behave, 2% better. Yeah. In that context, right? So if you pick any one person, it probably didn't do anything.
If somebody is 100% a dick, then that 2% better it's not going to push them over the edge that day.
Yeah. But if someone's on the edge of dickness,
you might push them out of there.
Keep it at bay.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a book called Predictably Irrational, which is it talks a lot about this phenomenon where basically, most academic sciences like economics, I don't know if you can call it a science, but academic disciplines like economics assume that people behave as rational decision makers and that people respond in a logical way when presented with certain types of information.
Which is also insane.
Yeah. And it's just absolutely not the case. And so they talk about things like priming where if they have an item that they're going to auction, it could be any random item, right? And then they'll ask each student to write down their birthday, like the day of the month that their birthday is. And then they will have them submit blind bids for auction items. And they're just the day of their birthday, because they wrote down a number first, provides them with an anchor point, and they will tend to offer a price that is fairly close to their birthday, right? Just like,
so if you got a birthday later in the month and you're going to
just pay more, right? Yeah,
so there's sneaky.
So there's all kinds of stuff where the human brain is really complicated. We don't know how the hell it works, right?
And we don't even know how emails work. That's why we're just going to say we don't know.
Yeah, so the best we can do, and we're like, okay, we need to send an email to people, and we have stuff in there that we know that is going to be interesting to them, and that we're cracking jokes, we're being weird and goofy, and we're pretty confident that this email they're gonna enjoy it and it's gonna brighten their day. But we got to get them to open it first, and we don't know how to do that. So robots will do it for us.
And I mean our goal kind of overall with all this stuff is just to recognize that we don't actually know, and that in most cases there's no way to know. And so the question is, how do we still do stuff without having to argue forever about what the right move is, given that we can't possibly know. And the answer is usually just try something, or in this kind of a case, try a bunch of things in an adaptive way so that we're always doing the best thing.
Right. Or the best thing of the things.
Of the things, yeah, of course. Right. We did. Right. Not the actually best.
My favorite one is the first title we used was "You Won't Believe How Clickbaity This Subject Line Is," which we all thought was hilarious.
Nobody
else good open rate.
Yeah. People like, fuck this clickbait. Self-referential clickbait, I guess, is not a thing.
Too high.
Also, speaking of robots doing things for us, while we were talking earlier, I had to turn off Dropbox notifications on the podcast computer because it kept saying the robot of the web has changed a file in your Dropbox folder. So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Who's the robot? Who's the robot of the web? And why does it keep changing things in Dropbox, Adam?
We a while ago we talked about this a bit, which was I made a thing called the Ink Tube at the time, which was a little program one program for Sam, one program for Seth. So on Sam's side, he could run it anytime he wanted to convert all of his Inkscape files into a bunch of images.
Inkscape is what we use to make our artwork for the games.
And because the process at that time was basically Sam would have to select a thing, manually export it, name it, put it in the right spot, and then I would have to delete the bounding box that Sam forgot to. Seth would have to fix the manual errors, and then pull it into the game, and then rename it, and then reorganize things, and then
a lot of overhead.
Change. There's a lot of overhead and a lot of room for error on both sides, but also just it's a lot of work. So I saw them doing this, and I was like, guys, just let me make a robot.
There's got to be a better way.
Well, importantly, you saw us doing this for all 500 unique sprites in Crashlands.
Yeah.
Well, this is an important point because there essentially was like a minute and a half of export overhead per object for me that I made, which means that with the bajillion items in Crashlands, you just multiply that by basically 1.5. Anything that I had to export, whether it was a particle that took me a minute to draw or like a huge boss that took me 2 hours to put together, every single one of those took about a minute and a half to make sure I was in the right spot, make sure the bounding box was gone, all this stuff.
But it's not just that, because it's also the attentional deficit.
Exactly. So this breaks up. So I'd be working on something and I'd be like, all right, I need to export it. Go do that. There's a bunch of different things you got to do.
You can't just do art.
So there's that. And then the secondary problem is that if Seth was like, it'd be cool if you change the color of this thing. Or, hey, could you make this 15% bigger? Mm-hmm. It's not just the case that I can just go do that and then it's in the game, right? I have to go do it and then do the burdensome piece of exporting again. So
it's kind of like when there's a 30-cent transaction fee.
Yes.
And it's like, well, if you're going to buy a thing that's $1, you're like, shit.
Yep. Right. Pay mainly transaction fees.
So even a small thing has a big cost attached to it.
And so it made it actually made us more, constrained or more, less flexible when it came to, when it came to saying, okay, can we change this? Because whether it was color, whether it was, we need, 20 different variations of this enemy. Like, no way. I'm not going to go spend half an hour exporting this.
Right. Just to have to change it and re-export it again later.
And so this is where Adam's Ink Tube came in, which was the idea was to have it handle the export process for us, as opposed to having us have to handle it ourselves, hopefully reduce all the human error out of it and that sort of thing. So the first iteration, when did that get finished? Like November, December?
Like that, yeah.
First iteration was finished and it required Python to run. So you had to have Python installed on your computer. You had to set up a config file for it. And then as an artist, whenever you saved your project and you're like, okay, I'm ready to go, then you'd have to go over to the Python thing, enter a few different values to tell it to run. And then it would export these things for you. Sometimes not correctly, just like it would miss some stuff. So it was better than exporting.
It was more like a batch exporter.
Yes.
You still had to manually go and do the export and then usually verify things and stuff like that.
Right. So that was the V 1.0, and then we had a chat.
Well, actually,
we switched.
Then Game Maker 2 came out.
Oh yeah, okay.
Because on both sides, I'm both exporting because now the assets need to be named differently, they're organized differently. On the Game Maker side, it's a completely different file structure. Just everything is different, and so now both ends of the problem were just new problems. And so I needed to go change the ink tube to deal with that. But at the same time, I was like, how much can I just automate this? Right. Because and the whole point of this is that if you're making games or doing really anything, when it comes to process improvement, one of our core beliefs is that there's really no better thing you can do than build tools to automate stuff, which is why we believe so strongly in tools. that 2 of our 7 people in the studio are full-time tool developers, right? And it's because our goal is to make it so that for everybody else, they only have to do the thing that absolutely is required to be done by a human being, right? So when it comes to Sam and Tifa doing the art, they should just be able to make art. That's
the
their
end.
goal. The end. When it comes to Seth and Sher pulling in game assets, they should just have access to the game assets. They should just be in the game, right? And then wherever somebody wants to have a check or wants to control when a thing happens, then we need that. But otherwise, everything should be automated. So then I made Inkbot. Now it's called Inkbot because it's much more of a robot.
Because it's
Lives
a
on the
robot.
line.
It's not a pump that you have to manually pump it like a bike pump.
Right.
Now it's a robot.
Now it's a robot. So it lives on a server inside of Dropbox. And
I don't even know how that works.
And then the art assets. So now when Sam and Tifa are working on their art, those art files are just saved in Dropbox in a folder that the robot.
So
is paying
the
attention
raw
to.
art files, like
The
the
raw art
the
files.
SVG from Inkscape,
Right.
Not the exported, but
Not the
just
export,
like
just
the literal.
SVG. So
Yeah.
so Sam just has his file open and he's editing stuff and so on. Every time he saves it, the robot sees that happened.
It's like, oh, wait, what happened?
so it's just watching for saves all the time, right? So the moment the thing gets saved, it then takes a copy of the file, identifies all of the sprites, identifies all the sub images, exports everything, names it all properly, does all this background correction and edge correction to get rid of aliasing problems that we've seen in GameMaker, and then package those up into a GameMaker friendly format, and then has them all ready to go. And then all Seth has to do is at any moment he's like, okay, I want these assets now. He just runs a script on his machine and
Just
it
double click it.
You just double click it and it just pulls everything and it dumps it.
Yeah, it's like, hey, do you want to bring in all the images for this project? And I'm like, yes.
Yep.
And then they're in
Done.
And then they're just in GameMaker, right?
Yeah.
And so then Seth can use them however the hell he wants.
You know, this reminds me of when the dads were here landscaping. Diane and I bought some bushes after they left to go put in the yard where Dad told us, mark the spots, get these things, put them here. And we couldn't find our spade, so we had no like big shovel to dig with.
Right.
But I had a trowel, so I went out there and I was like, I'm gonna do this, and so. Furiously digging at the earth with this thing, and after about 5 minutes, like my arm hurt. I made a tiny dent in the ground. The shovel had like bent a little bit around my hand, like it was just not.
I
going
actually
well.
broke my trowel in half when I was trying to do something similar
Yeah.
last year. It's not a great
So-
tool for that.
But then I was like, I know we have a spade. I don't know where it went. We don't have that much stuff in the house, but somehow it disappeared. So I went looking around, and after 10 minutes of searching, found it sort of like it had fallen behind some stuff in one of the closets. So I pull it out, and Diane's like, since we go outside and just quickly just power out all the holes for this thing. Literally like 20 minutes, get 7 holes made.
Hey, tools.
Exactly.
They matter.
Right. And, then I got to focus on the important thing, which is like, is this plant going in the right spot? Am I putting the dirt on it correctly? I'm not enraged. My tool's not broken.
Yeah.
Tools make a hell of a lot of a difference.
Yeah.
In this version, this 2.0, I mean, I've already seen it. Like I got so excited the first time that it worked. So we tested it.
Yeah, we tested it yesterday. We just took
Well, we tested it a
all
couple
of the-
days ago.
Or a couple days ago, yeah.
Which was hilarious because of one of the images I made, it showed that like I basically broke the shit out of one of Adam's algorithms because of the image I put in there.
Yeah, it's one of the assumptions stopped being true. Which is, it is the funny thing. Like the moment you build some software and then go put it into production, you're like, oh,
Everything breaks.
yeah. But you're like, but you
Every
got
time.
but I got all my example files that Sam provided of like all the kinds of art that we're exporting and stuff. But of
it's
course,
not all of
literally
them.
the first thing he made afterwards was something that was nothing like any of the
Yeah,
things
well,
that he
yeah.
made
As
before.
programmers, we live for constraints.
Yeah.
Right. We're like, yes, here are the parameters of the problem, but the artists live to break them. Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, I even remember like when Tiva first got here, and we were talking through the technical side of putting together tiles, right? And how to like make ground tiles and put doodads on them and stuff like that. And so we talked about the technical constraints of the current system, and then she made 3 tiles. And each one used a completely different system, which would have been fine.
Right.
But the game didn't have any systems to actually deal with the new configurations.
Right.
And I was like, how did you even think of doing this in 3 completely different ways? And so then I had to go back and rework my stuff and then get them all integrated. And now we have systems for that. But at the time, all assumptions break down when reality hits.
Well, this is the joke. Whenever Adam deploys a tool, that I just break it immediately.
But I mean, it's good though, because it is literally immediately. We don't have to wait for 5 weeks and then discover something, because Sam's
right
just
there.
like, I'm going to throw every curveball I've got.
Well, it
on
just
day
turns out
one.
to be whatever ball I throw at it
It's
is
a
just a
curveball.
curveball.
But also, you need to have. I mean, to be a tools developer, you need to have this kind of fascination with problem solving and not be emotionally attached to stuff.
Yeah,
Because
so it shouldn't be frustrating.
yeah, it would be like if you made a spade for Sam and you're like, here, I made this spade so you can dig your bushes, and Sam just like touched the ground with it and it just fell apart. And you're like, well, shit, I guess I
didn't account for you digging into concrete with it.
guess I need to make a tougher
Maniac.
spade.
It has to also be a jackhammer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and this actually reminds me, I was talking with a businessman a few weeks back in a much larger company, and we were chatting about this concept of tools development and stuff, and I was like, you know, what's your policy on this? Because they're maybe 15 times larger than us. And I said, you know, how do you deal with process improvement? How do you deal with tools? And they said, well, you know, we don't think we're really at a scale yet where that kind of thing would be useful, you know. And I just kind of squinted. How could that possibly be true?
Yeah.
So just think about that.
Oh yeah,
It's important.
tools are incredibly important.
Yeah,
Right?
it's taking the time to go fast, right?
Yeah. Well, we busted out all the new files for the new game. #big hype. And
Super vaguely hyped right now.
got all the docs ready to go to be put into the Inkbot to test this yesterday. And then Adam came over and we were looking at each other and I was like, should I do it? He's like, yeah. It's so I copy pasted it in, and then we just sat there for a second, and then the file started popping up, and it was working. We're like, "Oh man, it's so good!"
Everybody's
I
just
think it
doing
was
its
flawless.
business. Yeah, it worked.
Flawless.
As far as we can tell, we haven't tried importing into Game Maker yet.
Oh
That's
yeah,
the-
that's the other half.
Yeah, the Game Maker
all I can
project
say is it worked on my machine, which is the classic programmer.
nothing.
yeah. Yeah, well, we'll see. We'll see. All right, let's get on to some questions.
Okay.
These questions come from podcast.bscotch.net. They are asked by members of the Bscotch ID community, and some of them are asked anonymously, but we don't answer those.
Yeah.
So,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Pro tip:
Look it up.
we should probably remove that.
we
box.
we actually do, but you know, it's whatever. All right, let's get started. First question comes from Miguel.vanilla88.
Ooh.
delicious.
Miguel Vanilla. I think that's a new Ben and Jerry's flavor. All right. The question is, last podcast, you guys mentioned gains, brains, and games. What about drains? Do you guys ever veg out and spend a few minutes just relaxing, watching shows and whatnot? If so, how would you qualify this as beneficial, or is it just a time drain?
Interesting. We talked about this a little bit yesterday.
Just a time drain.
Yeah, Adam's is certainly of the.
I am 100,000,000% in the absolute 100% waste of time camp.
Well, I think the
on
question
those
is, what could it do for you?
Yeah. If you're using it to sort of parasocialize, and it's great. So if you're like, oh, let's go watch Game of Thrones together.
Let's go see
as
a movie.
group, or let's go
Yeah.
see a movie.
Mhm.
Used to watch Game of Thrones with some friends back in college. It was super fun. You know, everyone gathers up, makes a popcorn.
when it's time constrained for some reason.
Yes. Right.
Mhm.
Super good. And
But then I would actually argue that no, that is not the good thing. The good thing is the socializing.
It is.
in the group part.
If you just removed the movie part and you just actually talk to each other,
it would actually be
it
better.
might
I
be
mean, that's true, but it's nice to have, it's nice to have something
A joint
to
activity.
gather around. It's a campfire,
Mhm.
campfire
Except
activities.
when you can't talk during.
Oh my God, you're right. The television is the modern version of the campfire.
campfire
gather
is the
around
modern
it.
era.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Get around
but
the
only
campfire.
when you went to a campfire, it tried to sell you things.
Yeah,
Unless you're on HBO because they have commercials.
But then you had to
Yeah.
and then you have to pay for the fire every month.
yeah. You
Well,
just
but
keep
you gotta
you
pay
just keep
for
throwing
somehow.
money into the fire.
You just keep
so
throwing
it
money into the fire.
doesn't throw ads in your face.
It's interesting. I
It
think
starts to scream an ad at you, and you just throw a dollar bill.
Yeah.
in there.
I've been getting, I think, closer to the non-drain camp. I think there's an interesting sort of there's an underlying bit, I think, of at least American culture, which is about, if you have spare time, that you should spend some chunk of that time, quote unquote, vegging out.
It's me time.
It's me time. That means I'm going to do nothing. And it's interesting because I think, on some level, all of us seek oblivion at some point for a while, like getting drunk, for example. That you're like, yeah, I want to detach.
Or staring into a Vanta Black image.
Yes.
That would be a
Yes.
great way to veg out. What's in there? It's so black.
Sometimes if you've had a really hard day, you just like don't want to think anymore, right? I think that's what it is. It's like not wanting to think anymore.
But most people don't
And you go
think
to sleep.
anyway.
That's why I think that is true.
They
That is
want to
true.
keep not thinking.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. So,
Yeah.
you got a shitty job. You're like, I don't want to think about this during the day. You come
Like,
home,
what
you're
if I accidentally think? I better
better stay
prevent
busy.
that from happening.
Yeah, so I think drains are interesting because I think if you're doing it to seek oblivion, then I think there are better things to do with your time. We were talking yesterday about the joy of problem solving and how the reality is, if you think about, I mean, even just think about your past week, like what were some of the highest highs you had in the past week? They're generally probably going to fall in two camps. One is either socializing with people in a constructive way or problem solving.
Accomplishing some interesting thing.
Accomplishing
Well, this comes back to the question of miswanting.
Yes.
So, and there was a study done about people. So the concept of miswanting is when you believe that you want a thing, but then when you get it, it actually turns out to sort of have the opposite effect that you thought it would. So for example, in advance thinking, I'm going to eat a pint of ice cream tonight. And then you do it, and afterwards
I want to veg out. So
I'm going to veg out. I'm going to eat a pint of ice cream and watch Netflix.
Because I feel bad right now.
And afterwards, you feel worse, right?
Guaranteed.
Not only have you not done anything, but now you're going to shit for 6 hours. So that didn't pan out.
Yep.
And similarly, something like going to the gym, it takes a lot of effort, and you don't want to do it beforehand. And then after you do it, you're like, I'm really glad I did that, And so people are really, really good at miswanting.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think this comes down to like in our society and at large, we're very allergic to the concept of suffering. I think, and just like going to the gym, right? People are like, I don't want to go because it's like hard. It's like who cares?
So
I mean,
hard.
it's like it's just kind of a fact of what.
It's not even allergic to suffering. It's thinking of difficulty as suffering,
right? Or just
when really it's living.
Well, I think it's also misplacing the value, where the value on sort of what you try to do with your life is constructed such that there is no suffering, right?
You want everything to be easy.
Yeah, and I think so again, speaking from this, like I've been getting closer to the camp of saying don't drain, basically. But it's been a long road, and it's been interesting because it's even the case that now on the weekends when I have a bunch of lists of cool things that I want to do. So I've been baking recently. I got some juggling balls I'm going to start learning how to do. And then I have my writing that I've been doing. I have my art I've been practicing, all this stuff.
Did you also get a unicycle so you can ride it around while ball juggling?
Not yet, but maybe that'll happen next. But
I used to have one. So I can teach you some things.
I had this list of like all these cool things I want to do. And still though, when I approach the weekend, I'm like, okay, well, this is my quote unquote free time. So I should do nothing, right? Whether that nothing is, it usually has that sort of oblivion edge to it. So rather than, because I wouldn't quantify stuff like going and actively say reading a fun book or something like that, or anything that you really decide to do. I don't necessarily, I have a hard time classifying as like a pure drain. If you're like, oh, I love baking, for example, I'm going to go watch a baking show. That's different than if you're like, I'm just going to zone out in front of the television for like 4 hours, which a lot of people do.
No, I mean, yeah, if you watch a baking show and study it carefully to learn about baking.
Right. Well, I think that's the thing. Is
if you're watching it with a notepad.
Sense. Yeah, right.
Well, I think the thing is it's about being deliberate again. That's really what all this comes down to.
Yeah, having your brain on and thinking about stuff.
So, when you approach your weekend, if it's the case, you're like, oh, the new Dark Souls game came out. Like, I'm gonna go crush it and see if I can, beat the first, I don't know, zone or whatever, however the fuck Dark Souls.
Beat the first 6 minutes.
Yeah. Then that's a cool thing to do. You got a goal, got something to look forward to. If it's the case though, that you kind of wind into the weekend, you have all your list of cool stuff that you'd ever like to do in your life, but then you sort of like accidentally get trapped in the morass of YouTube or Reddit.
There's all this shit.
It's mainly internet stuff. I guess that's the interesting thing about it is I have a hard time.
TV,
internet and TV. Like I have a hard time pointing out things that are just in the world, that are just real things in the world.
I have this buddy. He's just addicted to pulling weeds.
Yeah.
He just won't stop cleaning up his garden.
Yeah. You know?
Like I just wish he'd stop vegging out and start being productive.
He's vegging out for real.
Yeah. Super hard.
As in he's taking veggies out of the ground.
Yeah. But I think it's interesting because we have more stuff pulling us away from, I think, what actually makes us happy nowadays than probably we ever have before as a culture, and it's hard.
Well, I think there's really our minds are very attuned to that kind of dopamine drip, that short-term satisfaction of novelty, kind of like the very brief chuckle moment, right? And so like as you're cruising through like Imgur, whatever, Reddit, Facebook posts, whatever, 90% of it, you're just like, pfft. Then every now and then you see a thing and you're like, and then that's that moment where you get just like a tiny little bit of sort of satisfaction out of it. And then you move on, but it's not meaningful really. And chances are you're not really going to even remember that thing even an hour from then, but it's accessible enough that you kind of just get that little persistent
Temporary
dopamine
high,
drip, right?
yeah.
And so let's say you're like reading a book or whatever, the information, you have to get it out of the book and you go through it and somebody's making a point, whatever, maybe reading an interesting story. Sometimes if even a really good book, it may take 30 pages before the story really like hits a good stride, and so you gotta earn that dopamine.
Yeah.
Right. You can't, it doesn't just get like thrown into your brain in little bits. And of course it's more satisfying in the long term and whatever, and doing things that are bigger and are bigger accomplishments and more challenging. You just go longer periods without getting that satisfaction.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd like to challenge our podcast listeners, if I may.
Ooh, our first pod challenge.
If you have a habit with either TV watching, being on Twitter, Reddit, or something like Imgur, or just watching YouTube videos, just for the next week, just 7 days, just don't do that thing, whatever it is.
But you need a backup plan. You got to know what you're going to do with that time.
I don't know if you do, because the thing is, once you're not constantly entertaining yourself, you're going to find some stuff to do pretty quick, whether it's
Draw
doodling or
something,
reading
whatever.
stuff.
Actually, I want
Just
to
try
take this
not to.
challenge further.
Okay,
Because
let's go.
I also have a belief.
Also, stop sleeping.
I'll do this challenge. I'll do it.
But I also have a belief relevant to this that I think is important, which is that because I have at various points cut out bits and pieces of things and be like, no more Reddit, no more whatever, right? And those always felt a little bit better, but it was always easy to slip back into it. And the reason is because I only cut out like a thing, right? I didn't just cut out
Because
all
they're all connected.
They're all connected. They all do the same thing. So the moment you're like, well, I'm going to cut out Reddit, but keep Twitter, right? Now you're just going to fucking spend more time on Twitter.
Okay. Sure.
And
Okay.
even if you don't, every time you're on Twitter, you're like, I'm getting the same drip feed I get on Reddit.
Yep.
And the back of your mind is Reddit, So what I found is that by doing the following, my life has improved enormously. So it's actually a set of things. This isn't necessarily the challenge you should take, but here's an example of the
Write this down.
This is the Full Metal Atom challenge.
This is the extreme case. So your phone is the leading culprit, right? I mean, laptops are.
So throw that in the garbage.
So turn off literally every notification. There's a setting on your phone.
I'm gonna do it right now.
You can turn off, and this is I'm fucking including text messaging. I'm including people being able to call you, right, without your permission. Don't even take phone calls. If you see you have a missed call, then call somebody back if you feel like it, right? Just turn off all of this.
This only works if one person in the relationship has their phone calls turned off, because then you can never call each other, though.
Yeah. Well, but here's the thing: there's never a case where somebody. I mean, it's like if you are a person who works in emergency services,
Yes.
right?
Then
Yeah, you got to take phone
Probably
calls.
leave that on.
But if you're a person worried about a family member getting in an emergency, you're not an emergency professional. You can't help them. If you find out later, like now you just delayed your sadness, right? Like so it's fine. There wasn't anything you can do about that, right? And so what you're doing, like all you're doing is in the back of your mind, like treating your anxiety by just letting people steal your focus all the time. So you need to remove all of the sources of unintentional focus stealing. So what I've done is I've turned off all of my notifications. I've removed every standalone application that can do it, like Twitter and Facebook and whatever. So none of those and YouTube. So none of those are available on my phone. I instead have podcasts in my Kindle app, so that anytime that I would normally be like, oh, I'm in the bathroom now, let me like open up Twitter or whatever, I can just continue reading a book, right? Anytime I'm in the car or walking somewhere or doing some work outside, then I can turn on a podcast and learn some things, right? And I made this complete full switch about 4 weeks ago. And oh my God, my life is fucking enormous.
What's the biggest change you've seen?
I think the biggest change is actually, well, it's just like I don't think about it anymore. Every once in a while, like every few hours, I'm like, oh yeah, I should see if I have any text messages, right, from the past X number of hours, right? And I'll just open it up and see, and there aren't really any there. Or if there are, then I'm like,
cool.
Oh yeah, this wasn't important. Because now once you've removed that immediacy of this stuff, you just realize how none of this shit actually matters. And the other thing I've been doing is really aggressively getting rid of all of my email subscriptions. So the moment something enters my inbox, if it isn't a thing directed to me, a thing that I should respond to, I unsubscribe from it.
But you
If I
should
can't,
not do that for
I
the
put it into spam.
Butterscotch newsletter.
Well, yeah.
Keep
But
that.
no, this because it's a thing you get to read that improves your life, right? If
That's
I get
true.
those kinds of things, like, because I subscribe to a few newsletters actually.
I get Tim Ferriss's.
I get one
weekly.
called Tedium, which is this guy takes a thing he thinks sounds boring and then just digs deep enough until he finds something interesting.
Cool.
So it's kind of but yeah. So that kind of stuff, yeah, keep that, right? But keep it in a very controlled way. Like don't if it arrives in your inbox, don't just let it sit there. Either read it or snooze it and have it brought back later on when you actually do have time to read it, right? Basically control all of those components so that if you enter your inbox, whether it's when you open up your phone, you don't get to see if you have any missed messages. You don't get to see any of that shit. You just have a phone now, right? It's a thing and then it's a tool that you get to use. You get to decide what to do with it. And so by moving everything into decisions that I get to make about stuff, instead of things asking me to make a decision, right? Because that's the difference.
Right.
Every time you get alerted by something, it's somebody asking you to decide what to do about this right now. And I just got rid of all of that.
So I guess in thinking of the phone as a tool,
It's a tool.
and coming back to the spade analogy, the way your phone currently works, it'd be like you wake up in the morning and all of a sudden your spade is in your bed.
Yeah.
And you're like, get the fuck out of here, spade. I'm not going to be digging shrub holes right now. I got to get my day going.
And then it just makes little pinging noises.
Yeah.
Every time it remembers.
And then
that
you're
digging
in
a
the
hole.
shower and the spade is just like knocking on the door. It's like, hey, buddy, how about now? You want to dig some shrub holes now? Fuck off, spade.
Yeah. Yeah. What if instead the spade just like lays against your back door because the only time you ever need to dig holes is when you're going outside.
Yeah.
You know?
So you decide, I'm going to dig some shrub holes now.
And there's your spade.
This is the tool that I use for that.
And the beauty of that is so the only alerts I let through are my calendar alerts. Right. That's it. Because the calendar is a thing that I have control over that also I have decided is allowed to control me. Right. If it says I'm supposed to do something or go somewhere,
that's probably true.
Then that's true.
Because you put that on there.
That, exactly. Right. And so my past self is allowed to interrupt my current self and make me do a thing, right? Using the calendar. So I need some mechanism by
which...
you
look at your calendar, you're like, fuck you, past Adam.
Yeah. Exactly. Because you still need...
over my day.
You still need to be responsible for your shit, right? You still have to get your stuff done. And so you need to find the things... You decide what's allowed to interrupt you and remind you to like be on top of your shit.
So is the general sense of urgency accompanying everything nowadays a lie?
Yes, it absolutely is a lie.
Cool.
Like, I mean, if you guys haven't tried literally just turning off alerts for your text messages, it's fucking glorious. It's so good.
I gotta say, I don't like receiving texts because then I have to respond to them with this damn glass touch screen.
I love
with my
texting
giant
on my
fat thumbs.
my BlackBerry. Oh my
yeah,
God.
the physical keyboard.
Keyboard's great.
But here's the thing that all you have to do is not respond to texts.
Yeah, that's usually
because people who know you will then, they'll adapt to whatever, they'll consider it weird that like, oh, you'll respond to emails whenever you feel like it, but that's it. That's the only way they can contact you. Right. And this is actually true for like basically our whole family. If someone wants to contact me, they're best off, even my immediate family, even my wife, they're best off
sending me
an email that I can then respond to when I get around to it.
And otherwise, if they see you in person, they can tell you that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how I would prefer it. I would prefer just to be like, oh yeah, we have it on my calendar said we should see each other in person right now. Right. So now we are, let's talk about all the things that we want to talk about.
So really they should just send you a calendar invite.
Actually, which is how it's been going right now.
Yeah.
That's basically how we've changed it at the office is using calendar invites. So that now, like I know I got a bunch of pings yesterday in my inbox, my Gmail inbox from Sam inviting me to calendar events. And I was like, I don't know what these are, but it doesn't matter. I'm just going to hit yes to all of them. Yep. And then tomorrow morning when I get up, I'll just look and see what's on my calendar for the day.
Yeah.
I'm glad you don't check them. I'm going to put some crazy shit on
Turns out I've agreed to
refinance my mortgage.
Oh, it's on my calendar.
Self-world peace. Tuesday at 12 o'clock.
It's on my calendar. I'm doing it.
But then I can just delete an item and have it include a notification to Sam so that now he knows that thing doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Whenever he decides to allow his calendar to tell him that.
Whenever.
All
right. So next question comes from Space Bat.
Wait, I will recap real quick. What was the challenge?
The challenge is literally don't
all
let
of
anything.
Your notifications.
Yes.
So
turn off all your
get
notifications.
rid of all the apps.
Get rid of the apps first. Standalone apps. Get rid of everything.
So
except
Twitter
for
app, Reddit app, Facebook
keep
app,
your email,
Netflix app,
browser, podcast app, and Kindle.
Okay, and then turn off all your notifications on your phone.
Turn it all
I just did it on my Android. There's literally a button for it.
There's a button for it. Turn it all off.
So I did that.
Except for your calendar.
What about internet? So I use a tool called BlockSite, which lets you, because a lot of it's just habit based, right? So pop open a tab, go to Reddit or something.
Yep.
So I put BlockSite up, and then it redirects me to my workflow. Because the truth is, if I'm looking for, if I'm trying to go to Reddit or the New York Times, even without,
so you can set it up to redirect you somewhere more.
So it redirects me to my workflow.
Send me to my to-do list.
Because it's like that's actually where all the stuff is that I ever want to do.
Is that on a desktop?
It's on Chrome, so it's a Chrome plugin.
That'd be awesome to put that on a router, like on the router level, so that if anybody's ever in your house, you just set it up so that if they ever go somewhere they're not supposed to, you just be really
don't be more productive,
passive aggressive, and you send them to something else.
Yeah, so I recommend
nobody's gonna be
BlockSite.
distracted in my house.
Yeah, I recommend BlockSite for that stuff, and then Google Calendar for all these things. But so that way, if you put those those websites that you usually have a hard time with into block site, and then just try not to do it for a week. Get some
Yeah.
books, prepare
Also,
yourself. It's
just
fun.
try not to buy anything for a week.
Okay.
This is
Also,
the
don't
other
buy
thing,
anything.
like people are always like, they're always like thinking about what I like. I'm trying to buy some cool new like just like
Chill out.
Just chill out. Just don't deal with any of that shit and just focus on doing some interesting things.
Go to
right?
library. Get a
Yeah,
handful of
just
free books.
Go on a walk. It doesn't fucking matter. Just be actively doing something that isn't you just like seeking
Constant low level meaningless stimulation.
Whoa.
It's like
Yeah.
it only like seriously. And I think there's like I needed to actually go cold turkey was the thing. I just had to turn it all off, and that was the only time. And it was really weird for a few days because I still wanted to. I'd open up my phone because I got in the habit of opening my phone to see how many messages I have, right? For like text messages or emails or whatever. And now I open it and it doesn't tell me anything. It just tells me the time.
Perfect.
Right. Which is then really confusing because I was like, oh, but now I have to like go.
It's like
into
having a
check.
landline again.
It feels really good.
Now we
Cool.
now you got to switch back to a party line.
Yeah.
So
All right,
now
so-
that'll just be like one cell phone.
Yeah. And this is
on-
coming
on
from
the
somebody,
block.
and I am not a Luddite at all, right? Like I love technology and
Well, but you got to recognize what it does.
yeah, what's it for? Right.
What's it doing
So,
to you?
so try the butterscotch cold turkey method
yeah.
and over this next week, and let us know how it goes.
I like to think of
We'll
more
check
like a
in on it.
hot duck.
Butterscotch hot
method.
duck.
Yeah.
All right, sure. The hot
Yeah,
duck.
the hot duck approach. All right, next question comes from Space Bat, who says, "You said that you'll throw a business card away if the only point of contact on it is Twitter.
Sure, Twitter's useless.
What other opinions do you have about business cards?"
Twitter is the
Ooh.
address to your megaphone,
Yeah.
right?
That's
Like,
yeah,
I
that's a
don't-
good point.
Yeah. Hey, you want me to yell random shit about my life at you? Here you go.
other business card judgments? I try not to give a shit. If someone gives me their contact information on a card, I'm like, this is good.
The only thing that drives me crazy,
It
except for
is
the Twitter
weirdly
thing,
shaped.
is weirdly
business
shaped
cards.
ones, right? Because
Right, because you can't put them in your wallet.
you can't put them in
Yeah.
your wallet or in your stack.
It
of
has
business
to, yeah,
cards.
it has to be, credit card shape or some very slight
I
variation.
mean, if you want to
Just-
punch a
just
hole in
Google-
it, punch a hole in it. I don't
That's
care,
fine.
but don't
You-
mess up the.
Yeah, the border has to
Border.
remain intact.
Yeah.
Maybe you can curve those.
Yeah, we use
Borders a bit,
we
but-
use Moo for
Mhm.
ours, and you get the rounded edges one, and you get I think their normal ones are heavy. It's a heavy-ish
Yeah, the heavy
thing,
ones, yeah.
so they feel, and then they're matte, so they feel like they just feel smooth,
just
and
pro.
velvety.
Yeah.
They're not that expensive either, so you can get something like that, and then every time we give someone a business card, they're like, "Ooh." That's a good response.
Ooh.
So try to get a response with your business card, but not because it's shaped fucking weird.
Yeah.
Enough of it.
Don't be like, my business card's a piece of twine.
Yeah.
Hey,
I'm gonna
that's
throw
not
this-
a business card.
We did meet somebody. It was really hilarious. When we were at GDC, I think it was a student who we'd met previously came and was chatting with us a bit, and she handed us her business card, and then she apologized for it immediately because she was like, I didn't realize, because she tried to get a square one, but she didn't realize it was not only square but also like just bigger in every dimension than normal.
Oh, so it's like a huge.
So it was like a
square.
huge square. And so she was just like, I didn't know it was
Oh,
this
no.
size, And Seth took it and he just looked at her. He goes, "I'm sorry I have to do this, but I'm going to fold this in half right now."
Well,
And she was like, "Yeah, I know. It just has to be that way."
yeah.
Oh, yeah, because like you gotta be able
Prepare.
to use these things. But the other part is you need to remember that when somebody gets your business card, they're not going to deal with that thing that you just gave them, that physical item, for somewhere between 1 and 30 days, right?
Yep.
So if you give them a card and you've had a conversation with them, something about that card has to be sufficient for when they are digging through their stack of cards, 2 weeks from now, to see that thing reached into their brain chunks and
Where
ask,
did this come from?
Well,
what is this?
yeah.
Who
So,
is this
so one of
person?
the pro tips that we gave to a buddy of ours who was going to his first GDC, it was like, think about your persona as it connects to your business card. Right.
Mhm.
I was like, have something about you that also is a reminder of your business card, right? And connect the two. And so he wore a bright red button-down shirt with a black tie all through GDC. And then on his business card, he just had this kind of cool icon of a cool ass red shirt with a black tie on it.
Oh, cool.
And I was like, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. There you go.
Bind your person
Yeah.
to the card.
And so the thing is, like, I still remember that.
I will say
You know?
that a lot of artists put little caricatures of them on there, but they're so caricatured that I can't tell who it is.
Yeah. And it only works if you have a rainbow mohawk.
Yeah.
It's
like, oh, yeah.
And then so does the cartoon character. Like, yeah, okay, that's the rainbow
and then not
mohawk
too many
person.
other people do.
Yeah,
which is a problem. Did you see?
Yeah, I remember seeing there was a picture of people who did the train jam, and it was like 15 people who all had identical blue hair. I was like, you guys, it's no longer a uniqueness thing now. Now it's all just the same. So think about what you can do to kind of
Get a face tattoo,
Yeah.
Just go full bore.
But make sure it's not a common face tattoo.
Yeah, get someone else's face tattooed on your face.
Yeah. And then put that face on your business card. And people be like, hey, this looks like the tattoo of that person's face on their face.
Yeah.
But the other face.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good pro
So
tip.
it's basically
That would be very memorable.
the tip for your business card is both have an easily used business card. Also, not the super skinny ones. There's little rectangular ones. I put those in my wallet. I had one of them like fall out yesterday. I was like, where did this come from? I don't even know.
I think too, there's little like dispensers that people can get or make where they hold a stack of these little skinny cards. It's like a keychain that they have. And then they can like fold open the keychain and just like slide out a business card.
They might as well just slide them right into the trash can.
It's like, it's so hard to keep track of because it doesn't fit anything. Yeah. So yeah, keep it standard size, keep it memorable,
and be memorable and tie yourself to your business card.
Yeah, and of course, and sometimes you might want to take a really targeted approach. If there's a particular person you want to meet, get a tattoo of their face on your face.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that really,
and a business card that is actually just their business card.
Yeah. Dress like them, adopt their mannerisms. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and because there's
people love that. Actually,
there's an effect of like. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery.
That's true.
Yeah. And so I think it'll work.
Yeah.
I think
this is a good plan.
All right. Next question comes from Smelly Platypus. In the trailer for
platypus are smelly.
Probably.
Platypes.
All I know is that they shoot milk out of their skin.
All I know is that they seem to have every trait. So being smelly is probably a thing that they do.
They're venomous.
But they also probably smell great.
Probably also, but it depends on the time.
It's kind of probably
it depends on if you smell the milk side or the back side, probably.
That was a question.
Yeah. They've got kind of like lavender scented milk pads.
And then musky backs.
Musky back.
The old musk back. All right. Smelly Platypus says, in the trailer for Quadrupus Rampage, it says something like, defeat a god, while showing a picture of Pete. Pete also says when he is taunting you, you can't defeat me, I am a god. Is Pete really a god? He's the same species as Joby, and Joby died.
Mm-hmm.
Spoilers. Also.
Spoilers, thanks.
The Joby is from Tau Fight 2, and Pete is from Quadrupus Rampage.
Yeah, so this is because, we talk about this a lot, we did a lot of work establishing motivations in our narratives early on, and not a lot of work establishing.
And by a lot,
narratives.
you mean we were like, we should put a boss in it.
And then it was like, this thing's floaty. It's weird.
We did the bare minimum amount of work establishing motivations.
Yeah. So in the case of Quadrupus Rampage, we sent that out to reviewers, and one of them was like, this game's good, but there's no reason for me to play this. And it's because it didn't have a boss in it. Didn't have a reason for you. It literally had no motivation. So the week before launch, we put Pete in and modeled him after the previous sort of godlike creatures we put in. And the idea now, as far as lore is concerned, they're all of a particular race, and they're not gods at all. They just happen to be extremely technologically proficient, such that the rest of the creatures on Wonope tend to regard them as such because of course,
and they hoard their technology. They don't spread it to the rest of the
So there's that old quote. I can't remember who it's by, but the high technology is indistinguishable from magic. And that's basically where they're at. Mm-hmm. So they assert their godness over everybody else and use their technology as sort of
so they're just very egotistical.
Yeah, they're extremely egotistical, which is why. Well, first of all, they're killable because it's not a god; it's just a person with a helmet.
Yeah,
that's about it.
With a head person,
a head person with a floaty space helmet.
And we'll have more lore stuff about them in the future, of course, with other games.
But yeah, if you want to learn about them, we do have in the Crashlands manual, which you can find, I think, at crashlands.net. There's a link to it.
Just Google it.
And there's a whole backstory about who these folks are and what they're doing on this planet. Mm-hmm. So
go check it out.
Yeah, it's pretty good. All right, we got time for one more question. This question comes from LT. I love your processes of introspection and consideration. How do you know what you're doing, and more importantly, why you're doing it, and how it relates to your goals? Do you also take on tasks for the greater good that aren't necessarily an investment?
All right, let's break it down. Give me the first part. There's like 7 questions.
So the first part is just a comment about that LT loves the sort of introspective
Thanks, LT.
nature
love you.
of what we do.
Tea's pretty good.
And that LT seems to agree that it's important to know why you're doing what you're doing and how that thing relates to your goals.
Okay.
So the question though is, do we take on tasks for the greater good that aren't necessarily an investment? So I guess the summary of that would be like, do we do stuff that we think may not actually be a payoff for us in some way that may not actually relate to our goals directly, but just to kind of like propagate goodness into the world? I say yes.
Yes.
We have done things like mentorship programs.
Well, I think there's an interesting point here, though, which is that we don't do anything without having a goal in mind.
Yeah.
I'm not just going to go like to a bake sale.
Well, I think it's a question of whether it comes
Unless
back
it's
to
Girl Scout cookies.
Well, then, yeah, I'm going. But,
Yeah.
but it comes
Well,
back
that question
to
is it a financial goal or a business goal or whatever?
right. Well, I think
versus,
we have plenty of other goals that are. I mean, actually, most of our goals are non-financially related.
Yeah, for us, financial is secondary. Like our core
It's a
belief is
byproduct.
that if you focus on the process and on doing cool stuff and on focus on people and the people you've brought into to the thing that you're doing and so on, if you do all that stuff, then money is the thing that happens, right? And of course, it doesn't mean we don't think about it because we have to, right? And we still have to make considerations with money in mind, but that's not the primary consideration. If it ever has to be, then it is,
Right.
but that's actually pretty rare.
Yeah. So I think there's also the interesting question of like the concept of pure altruism, pure selflessness.
No, that's not sustainable.
Well, and not only is it not
Die.
sustainable, I think it's not a thing. So, for example, there is no circumstance under which I would argue that if you do something good, like for the greater good, so say you go do some charity drives, or as a game developer, you go give your time to like some students or something like that. There is no circumstance under which, in those conditions, you yourself are not going to benefit from the interaction. There might be different degrees of benefit, whether it's just a direct, like, oh yeah, I went and taught a student last Saturday, just like a friend of a friend or whatever, who wanted their kid to get exposed to game dev. It took 3 hours and taught them. During that process, you will learn a bunch of stuff about yourself, about teaching people. So in other words, there's no situation in which there's no future investment in yourself happening, I guess. At least none that I can think of.
But
Unless
even
you're doing things that are at a cost to yourself. But even then, I don't know. I mean, you're just building forward all the time.
some things
so-
are a pure cost, like watching
But-
Netflix.
Yes. Well, no, there's a very transient short-term benefit.
Yeah.
Which is you're like,
Yeah.
It is super transient.
yeah, and then that goes away.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, we've done things like we ran a mentorship program a couple times called the 8-Bit Dev Pipe, where we brought in people who wanted to learn more about forming a studio or about putting their games together and wanted feedback on that. So we met with them once a week for 8 weeks.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that counts because it was like we didn't
have any particular sort of
the goal was just to
thing
teach people
that-
stuff.
yeah.
But I mean,
But it was there was a self-motivated part of it, which is we have the idea that we want it to be the case that in St. Louis, we help to elevate the community so that we have more peers because we're in the Midwest and there just aren't a lot of game studios, right? So we thought we want to get more people into the trenches with us so we can talk shop with them more.
That's
Right.
true. It was self-motivated.
Yeah. And so, and even with things like, we're teaching the class at Wash U and we're doing that because we want to try to cultivate more talent in the area. Right. So that when it comes time to open up, future jobs, there may be more people around and that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, it turns out like some of these things end up being a much higher cost than you anticipate or don't turn out the way you want. You never know. But the fact is like, there's always going to be something. Like, you're never going to do something for no reason.
Well, I think that's the
Right.
other thing is that if you're really introspective about stuff, you will always gain from everything you do. I mean, even the cancer shit, right? I mean, even the second round, which was just like this, just frankly terrible thing, that was really hard to dig
Well,
out
that
of.
was cancer, but
Well, I mean, like it was much darker.
the
the
cancer
second
was
time around.
fine. It was
a psychological.
right.
thing.
It was the poison and the
Yeah.
and the psychological.
yeah.
But I think that it's taken me like a year or so to sort of dig some good stuff out of there. But I've done it because I'm very deliberate about making sure that period of time wasn't just
Wasted.
a piece of shit. Yeah. Every bad relationship I've had, same thing, right? Every bad everything has turned into with enough sort of mental effort, some good stuff to take with you.
You have to mine
on
it.
the road. Yeah. So I guess that's interesting. I think if you're doing it right, there is no circumstance under which you can do something selflessly because you're going to be gaining from everything. You're like a Katamari ball.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can just get knowledge and stuff
Yeah.
out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
we do stuff for motivations that are completely different from studio stuff frequently, or that we think we're not.
Actually, I would argue that we never do.
Well, I guess, yeah.
Based on
Just-
what you
yeah,
just-
that's
Based on
right.
what you just said.
We can always find a way to type it. I mean, even like talking about, I'm reading this, like read this book, Predictably Irrational, that I mentioned earlier. The idea there is like, I want to learn more about my own motivations and stuff, and like how I might be subject to bias or making bad decisions or whatever. But also it's the case that like, as a business owner, I need to understand people better.
Mhm.
As a game developer, I really need to understand people, because what a game is it's a machine that puts emotions into people, right? And demands things from them as well. And so I need to know all this stuff. And so any like fiction book I read, I'm always thinking about how this connects to stuff that relates to my work. Any book about people, about history,
it's
about
all the same. I guess it's the weird thing, in asking the question, because it's like you can't, or I guess if you are separate,
if you're mentally active, then everything you do is an investment.
everything also.
Oh my God. All right. Well, I think that covers that question. So this has been Coffee with Butterscotch. Thank you all for listening. And again, if you want to get your questions on next week's episode, go to podcast.bscotch.net, ask with your Bscotch ID. And also we'd like to thank Monique for putting the podcast together and Fat Bard for being our producer.
Yeah.
We're now much more confident that that's what he is.
We're pretty sure that's what that means.
And also Eric Hibbler for making our sweet art.
Yes.
So beautiful.
Yes. So thank you all, and we will see you next week.
Also, leave reviews and stuff. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.